Good morning, you all in Europe, and good day to you all from different countries. This is Eve Lau, the moderator of today's Section 3, the webinar. I'm from Hong Kong. Nice to meet you all. Before we start, let me explain to you the interpretation and Q&A. So we have translation into Russian that is accessible by clicking on the globe at the bottom of your screen. The chat icon is for remarks and information. The bios of the panelists will be available there too. So for questions to panelists, please use the Q&A icon. Some of them will be answered by our staff or viewers, and a few will be dealt with by the panelists during the Q&A session. Thank you for you all joining this wonderful Section 3. Let me give you a warm welcome again to the Section 3 prospects for Northeast Asian Economic Union. Thank you so much for your kind attention and dedication to our webinar, which are so precious to us. And actually, it's very seriously for us to open a debate on the Northeast Asian community and building, along with the declared vision by the Universal Peace Federation founder, Dr. Sun Myung Moon, back in 1981. Today, we have invited four very professional panelists from the Northeast Asia and beyond. They can share the insights on this topic, the prospects for Northeast Asian Economic Union, and that we can hear their professional presentations, and afterwards they will be answering questions and have discussions. So let me introduce the first speaker to you, Dr. Claude Béglé. Dr. Béglé is the former member of the Swiss Parliament and the founder and president of the Symbioswiss, a club of entrepreneurs with a business-oriented vision. He has a PhD in economics, a Master of Law, and of international relations. He has held leading positions in prestigious organizations and companies in numerous countries and the group like Nestlé and DHL Express. Dr. Béglé has been involved with a wide spectrum of sectors, such as support for innovation and startups, clean tech, and the environment. Let us listen to his insightful views. Dr. Béglé, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I will try to go straight to the topic first. Towards a Northeastern Asia economic integration. Next. As we all know, that region has a huge potential. The GDP of China, 40.1 trillion, Japan, 5.4, Russia, 1.7. If I take only those three, it's already bigger than the entire US economy. And we all know that in less than 10 years, China is very likely to overtake as the #1 economic power in the world. But you have other tycoons like the Korea, 1.6, Taiwan, 635 billion, Hong Kong, which could be considered or not as part of China, 341, Vietnam, 340. Now you see what is interesting, very big disparities in the GDP per capita. You have very high numbers for Hong Kong or Japan, and you have quite a number of countries with about 10, which would be 4 to 5 times less, and then even much lower, 3 for Vietnam. And I think that complementarity between the GDP per capita and the level of contribution to each economy will be key for that integration. It also has about a quarter of the world population, so hence very strategic importance. Next, please. The threat. Well, above is a US Navy carrier, below is a Chinese submarine. The conflict, which is at that stage not a military one, but the conflict between the US and China becomes more and more frontal. USA has by far the most powerful armed forces in the world, followed by China, but about 3 times less. China, however, cleverly extends its influence through the Belt and Road project, which is more than a logistics project. It's really a political influence project as well. China economy will overtake North America anyway, and the COVID effect has even accelerated that factor. Asia will grow much faster than America and Europe, linked to the digitalization process, and Asia will take the lead. Hence, there is a risk of confrontation. If you have a constantly rising Asia and let's say stable, slightly declining Western world, but you have the opposite in terms of military forces, hopefully it will not generate a clash. There are potential areas where that clash could happen. It's Hong Kong, it could be Taiwan, Korea, South China Sea, etc. But basically, we have face-to-face 2 different, very different visions of the world. Next. The world from an American perspective. Democracy prevails, and we have seen it even with the event in January in Capitol. You have counterpowers in America, in the US, capitalism, personal freedom and responsibility is a very key element. Now, the public opinion is basically led by the media, which are to a large extent free. The agenda normally is driven by the elections periodicity. The West believes very much in the rule of law, including those counterpowers and including human rights. At the same time, it's supported by technological and military supremacy. US had seen themselves for some time as the policemen of the world, or like having a moral mandate to interfere. I say so far because I expect that it's going to change. Next. China, in turn, is more autocratic. The key thing is the predominance of the Communist Party. I think Chinese are ready to make a lot of reforms, except the fact that the Communist Party must be at the helm of affairs. The economy is a strange combination of centrally led and market economy. Already years and years ago, if you really wanted to meet somebody who understands capitalism, you would find them in the school of the Communist Party. Sounds like odd, but is real. Now, key element is that the common welfare justifies the interference into the individual freedom. I would say this is, without putting any judgment value, the major factor. In the West, the freedom, personal freedom is key. In China, the commonwealth, the common better life. We had better cities, better life. The fact that we live better together justifies that interference. The public opinion is, of course, more under the influence of Big Brother and the state organization. The timing of the agenda is completely different than in the US. China thinks very long term. Singapore would do the same. China was, for long periods in history, the most evolved country in the world. And China is just waiting, more or less patiently, until they take again that leadership. It's back to the future. It heavily invests into knowledge, society, and into technology. And those in the West who believe that they are just copying are completely wrong. They initially focused on export economy because they wanted to create jobs. Now you've seen the difference, for example, of the per capita in Vietnam and in China. So the China is moving up the ladder. They are more moving towards their own local economy. Their considerable wealth accumulated, also finance. They are more billionaires in Beijing than in New York. And they are gradually building their foreign policy, the military muscle, even the airspace conquest, and the future hegemony. It's very interesting. About 10 years ago still, they were very reluctant to try to claim hegemony. Now, little by little, there is a certain confidence level and they are starting to claim it. Next. So all of that will lead to a new world order. I think the US retreat out of Afghanistan last weekend is a real landmark. It probably will stigmatize the decline of the Western hegemony and the need to interfere in order to bring Western values in some other parts of the world. Without discussing any values, but I think that hegemony will reduce and probably slightly disappear. The US direct involvement is less likely in the future, and we see that Taiwan is already a bit worried about what may happen if the US can exit so easily after having invested huge amounts of money in certain countries like Afghanistan, but they retreated. I think the world order will move from mono to plural leadership. And by the way, it's not only US versus China. For example, Russia will play a very important role as an arbitrator. Let's not forget that a few months ago, we had in Geneva that summit between Biden and Putin. It was Biden-Putin, it was not Biden-Xi Jinping. So it shows that Russia, which is a master in diplomacy, also at the UN, they will play a very key role as an arbitrator. And of course, when we talk of the Northeastern region, even more so. There will be space for regional powers and regional alliances. So the power will get more fragmented between those alliances. From an economic perspective, the post-Trump and post-pandemics show a redesign of the supply chain. So the West doesn't want to depend too much on the supplies coming from East Asia, and the Chinese economy, reversely, a bit like the Indian economy, will rely more and more on their domestic market. And of course, continue to export, but rely very much on the domestic market. And the Chinese domestic market becomes a very big attraction, as has been and still is the US domestic market. Next. So towards a Northeastern Asia economic union, we see that there are a lot of regional clusters, alliances, and they will become most probably the new normality. If you take the European Union, it's an economic union, but it's also 2/3 shared values and 1/3 political. NAFTA would be economic. CIS is mainly economic as legacy of USSR. ASEAN, mainly economic. TPP, it's a question, Trans-Pacific. It has some hidden political ideas. The Belt and Roads is also mixed objectives and many, many others. So why not a Northeast Economic Union? It would make a lot of sense. The region enjoys a faster growth than most others, but the issue is the rivalry between the US and China. Everybody needs an access to the Chinese market, but nobody wants to be cut off from the Americas. Next, I will hurry up because I think I'm at the end of my time. That economic integration is de facto already a reality. Most neighbors are trading a lot with China. For example, Japan and South Korea. Some, like Thailand, have become pure subcontractors of China in the automotive sector. Or Taiwan has been the #1 foreign investor in People's Republic of China. So that integration exists. Now, there could be a very interesting repartition of roles based on each country's specificity and different development levels. Russia could bring fundamental research and science and access to oil and minerals. Japan could provide high-end precision quality, premium components and systems. South Korea could also contribute high-end technology and hardworking, skilled labor. China would gradually switch towards domestic demand, not just mid-quality export market. And North Korea could also open up and offer a cheap, hardworking, and let's say competent workforce. Next, Europe could be a facilitator. The ancestor of the European Union was the Economic Community for Coal and Steel. The objectives was to become mutually dependent from each other, hence no more war. If you have put your steel together, you can't build tanks and cannons against each other because it's a shared resource. EU is at the same time based on multiple, very strong culture and a need to accommodate them. The challenge is how to move fast in the integration vis-a-vis the other blocks, while respecting the individual particularities. Europe has a lot of know-how on that, sometimes fails, but has learned. Europe can help in designing a similar model in Northeast Asia. And since it's not directly involved, it is more neutral, so it can come as a facilitator. Next. So the impact on the local welfare and peace of that union. Integrating complementarity of economic inputs would help to the stability of the region. Using mineral resources, industrial transformation of those resources, for example, from Siberia, robotization, digitalization, this will be the path. Prosperity will come from a common effort, shared value. You cannot destroy by war or otherwise what you need. To cooperate, people need to know, to respect each other. It may help reducing the scope for nationalistic ideology and propaganda. Countries having moved from Stalinism to market economy, like Mongolia or Vietnam, may share the experience with others. And countries like North Korea may prefer to enter into this game instead of remaining outside of the international community. And last, economic cooperation is likely to boost regional prosperity. It's a win-win solution, which probably doesn't leave anybody on the side of the road. It can also contribute to avoid a nasty confrontation east-west, because this could be, don't want to call it a third world war, but could be something very, very big deflagration. It implies a dialogue and a mutual understanding, and it is seed for peace. The picture you have behind you, so peaceful, is North Korea. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Béglé. Yeah, it's very informative, and I think it's very contributive in our discussion later on. Thank you so much for your updated presentation. So next, let us invite up Dr. Vladimir Petrovsky. Dr. Petrovsky has a PhD in political science and is a full member of the Russian Academy of Military Science and a senior counselor at the Asian Economic Cooperation Foundation. He is a member of the editorial boards of the Diplomatic Service, International Journal of Asian Economics, and International Journal on World Peace, among others. He is also the author of 4 books and numerous articles on the theory of international regimes, multilateral security arrangements in the Asia-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic regions, civil-military relations and security sector reform, international peacekeeping and conflict resolution, human security and human development issues. Dr. Petrovsky, you have 10 minutes. In the last 5 minutes, you will see me on screen. Dr. Petrovsky, please.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, it's my honor to join our discussion on the future of the Northeast Asian Economic Union. And this is quite a task, because I think that the question which was posed and which we are all supposed to answer, is it possible to replicate something which happened in Europe, I mean the European Union, in the region of Northeast Asia? And actually, I think it would be very, very difficult because just because of the 2 basic facts. The first is that historically, Northeast Asia was not inclined to collective action, as you know. So quite a different political culture in Europe and in Northeast Asia. And in Europe, we have had you know, the many multilateral arrangements through the recent decades. It's not the case for Northeast Asia. And the second basic fact is that the lessons from the World War II are still not learned here in the region of Northeast Asia. We know that in Europe, it was all settled and peace was achieved, and there was a repentance on the side of Germany, and that was the base to build an economic integration in Europe. And here in Northeast Asia, we still have the remnants of the Cold War, the lessons from the Second World War and from Korean War are still not learned. What I mean is the system which was based upon the San Francisco Peace Treaty of 1951. The result of is still very sad, because we still have ongoing territorial disputes and unsettled questions between the countries of the region. We have territorial disputes between China and Korea, Japan and China, Japan and Korea, etc., etc., etc. And we have military union, bilateral military unions, the US, South Korean, the US, Japan, and now there is a confrontation, ongoing confrontation between China and the United States. So in this particular circumstances, it's very difficult to arrange something, I mean, collective action. But the opportunities still do exist, because as of now, we have at least several multilateral integration mechanisms in this region. For example, just to mention, we have 2 very ambitious projects One is RCEP, which was established recently, you know, which is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And we have updated Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is CPTPP, which was already mentioned. And the question is, if while keeping in mind Northeast Asian Economic Union, is it something which is to be arranged or to be built separately as something brand new, or it should be built, it should be part of the existing mechanisms? So we have RCEP, we have CPTPP, and by the way, the big question is whether the United States are going to come back to TTP. Then what we have else? We have some other arrangements. As you know, there is ongoing process of negotiation to create trilateral free trade area between Japan, Republic of Korea, and China. Another question which we have to answer is this type of economic union will be inclusive, or it is supposed to be closed for certain countries, like China, for example. And just to mention, in Eurasia, we also have integration. We have, as you know, Eurasian Economic Union, and we have, of course, Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and now we have the process of conjunction of Eurasian Economic Union and Belt and Road Initiative. And Russia also supports the idea of the big Eurasian partnership, which is supposed to be a kind of inter-trade bloc communication mechanism. And just to mention, we also have some mechanism here in Northeast Asia. We have some mechanisms of cross-regional and cross-border cooperation, something like the Association of Northeast Asia Regional Governments. And of course, the task of building this community is very, very difficult. And but just to mention, you know, some big infrastructure projects could become a good driver for creating this type of economic union. And you know that the UPF is have been supporting projects, this type of projects like Bering Strait Peace Tunnel, and some other projects of undersea tunnel bridges, like tunnel bridge between Sakhalin and Hokkaido, and just to mention which the tunnel, a project of undersea tunnel, which is supposed to connect Japan and South Korea. And this one is particularly important because if implemented, it could become the longest undersea tunnel in the world, more than 200 kilometers length. So it's very ambitious projects, and just a few words about, is it possible to implement this project? We need something to compare with, and the good comparison could be project which was launched in China, and which is supposed to be another one of the also one of the longest undersea tunnels in the world. It is supposed to connect the ports of Yanhai in Shandong province and with Dalian in the province of Liaoning. And it should be something about 125 kilometers long, which is longer than the longest existing tunnels taken together. I mean, Seikan Tunnel in Japan and La Manche Euro Tunnel. And I just mentioned this particular project because it was well prepared of, and it was launched in the year 2019. And there's a budget of, for example, there is a budget of $43 billion. And the project implementation period is about 19 years. And what is the most important, this project has very good economic justification. For example, if to travel from Yantai to Dalian by car, it will take about 12 to 15 hours. If you take a ferry boat, it would be 6 to 7 hours. But if you use this underwater tunnel, it will take you just 1 hour. So this is a very good economic incentive. So there is this, the sources of finance exist, very good economic justification exists, and the payoff period is also not bad. It's about 10 to 12 years. What I mean is, if the proposed undersea tunnel between Japan and South Korea could have the same kind of justification, it's quite, it could become quite practical. But we should also keep in mind that alternatives also do exist, because the final points of destination, which is Busan City in Korea and Fukuoka in Japan, they are already connected by this high-speed ferry boat. And it will take you about 2 hours to travel from Fukuoka to Busan, for example. And the biggest question is, shall we keep in mind this type of projects? And shall we think in more practical terms about how to try to build Northeast Asian Economic Community in general? We have to start to launch some kind of practical discussion. And my proposal is maybe we could have a kind of international think tank group or a kind of ongoing workshop to discuss these particular issues in more practical terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Petrovsky. Yes, it's very important with the particular projects mentioned that we can have understand better for feasible proposal for further development on this topic. So next, let me introduce the next speaker, Professor Vladimir. Professor Vladimir is a leading authority on Chinese elite politics. He is the founder and president of the WWII China Institute, New Zealand, honorary principal of the Veritas Collegiate Academy, and chairman of the advisory council of the Center for Singapore Studies at Shenzhen University. Professor Ji Yu has obtained his Bachelor of Law and Master of Law in International Politics from Peking University and PhD in Political Science from the University of Chicago. He has taught at Peking University, Roosevelt University, the University of Chicago, American University, St. John Fisher College, Charlton State University, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He has also been visiting distinguished professor at Shanghai Chiao Tung University in China and chair professor at National Chengchi University in Taiwan. Let's invite up Professor Bo, please.
Thank you very much. Dr. Katsumi Otsuka, Chairman of the UPF Europe, Middle East, Mr. Jacques Martin, Co-Chairman of the UPF Europe and the Middle East, Mr. Yashihiro Yamazaki, Chief Organizer for Session 3, and Mrs. Eve Law, Secretary General of the Chinese People's Federation for World Peace International. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. Distinguished fellow panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from New Zealand. It is my great honor to join you for this forward-looking conference on such an important topic. The title of my speech today is Creating a Northeastern Asian European Economic Union, a proposal. I'd like to take this opportunity to propose a Northeast Asian Economic Union, NEAU for short, based on the European Union model. First, I'd like to propose an NEAU with 3 primary goals. The first goal is to form a single market of Northeast Asia, including Greater China, that is mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, Japan, Russia, Mongolia, South Korea, and North Korea. The second goal is to create a single currency of Northeast Asia and eventually eliminate the currencies of member states. The currencies that could be abolished include RMB, renminbi of People's Republic of China, Hong Kong dollar, Macau pataka, New Taiwan dollar, Japanese yen, Russian ruble, Mongolia tarag, Korean Republic yuan, and Korean People's yuan. And the third goal is to form a single travel zone of Northeast Asia. And people within the zone could travel freely from one country to another. People from outside the zone could use a single visa to travel within the zone. Second, I'd like to propose timetables for these goals. First, NEA-EU should try to form a single market and a single tariff zone by 2040. It took Europe about 8 years to create a common market, another decade to form the tariff union. EU model began with a proposal. We all know this called Schuman Declaration for two countries, France and Germany, on two industries, coal and steel in 1950. Was funded by 6 countries, France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, and Luxembourg, by the Treaty of Paris of 1951, extend to other European countries as European Economic Community as a result of Treaty of Rome of 1957, and led to the formation of the European Community in 1967. In 1968, the EU formed tariff union with no tariffs and import restrictions between EC countries and a single tariff rate for trade between EC and non-EC countries. Eventually, through the Madrid Treaty of 1992, the European Union was born in 1993. Second, the NEA-EU should try to create a single currency by 2050. It took Europe 30 years to create a single currency, euro. With the initiation of the Wiener Plan in 1969, the EC leaders officially launched the new currency and the European Monetary Union in 1999. The euro became the legal currency in 11 EU countries, along with their national currencies in that year. Currently, 19 out of 27 European Union members are using euro as their national currency. In addition, 5 non-EU countries have also adopted euro as their national currency. Andorra, Monaco, Montenegro, San Marino, and the Vatican City. Third, the NEA-EU should try to create a single travel zone by 2035. It took Europe 10 years to establish a Schengen area that has abolished all passports and all other types of border control among member countries. From 5 founding members in 1985, Schengen area now has 26 European countries, including 22 EU members and 4 non-EU members. They are Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. Third, I'd like to highlight the regional and the global impact of the NEA-EU. Obviously, the NEA-EU will have a huge impact regionally and globally. Putting together, the NEA-EU will have the largest population, largest territory, and the largest economy in the world. Currently, the total population of NEA countries is 1.8 billion. That is 22.77% of the world total population. The total area of the NEA countries is 27.33 billion square kilometers, which is 5.36% of the world total territories. The total nominal GDP of the NEA countries in 2020 was 26 trillion US dollars, which is 31.24% of world total nominal GDP. That is, its population is 4 times of the population of the EU. Its territory is 6,457 times of the territory of the EU. And its economy is 1.54 times of the EU. As a single market, it will be the largest market in the world. As a single currency, it will serve the largest population on the planet. As a single travel zone, it will be the largest travel zone on Earth. It will eliminate potential wars between 2 Koreas, between China and Japan, between mainland China and Taiwan, and between member states and other countries. I know there will be obstacles, oppositions, and resistance to the emergence of the NEA EU in the future, but I'm confident with faith and courage and wisdom for all concerned, this dream will come true one day. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Bo, for your concise, also to the point speeches into 3 areas. I think we will have a good discussion afterwards. So next, let me invite up Mr. Gerard Willis. Mr. Willis is the chairman of the H.J. Magnolia Korea Foundation, a charitable organization that serves as the holding company for a multi-industry conglomerate with interest in machinery and automotive parts, hotels, and resorts and construction and real estate. Based in Asia since 1988, it has been a general counsel, transactional attorney, and business leader for Fortune 100 companies, a Wall Street law firm, and a private direct investment fund. Most recently, he was Vice President on General Counsel Asia Pacific for Honeywell International, a diversified technology company with over $7 billion annual revenue in the Asia Pacific. Prior to that, he was based in Singapore with El Paso Corporation and in Hong Kong for APCO China and the Wall Street law firm of Milbank, Tweed, Hadley, and McLeod. He has a BA from Brown University, an MA from the George Washington University Elliott School of International Affairs, and JD from the New York University School of Law. Let us listen to Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis, please unmute. Please unmute, Mr. Willis.
Yep, got it. Again, thank you for that introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this distinguished panel about this important topic. I think all of the speakers concur that regional economic cooperation can play an important role in fostering a globalized economy and promoting growth and alleviating policy, and especially as we come out of the COVID crisis. If I may use a US sports analogy, I am in baseball terms the cleanup hitter on this team, the 4th speaker. What that means is I have the benefit of the first 3 hitters and all of the very important points that they've made. And to the extent that I can in my own presentation, I'll try to, whenever possible, relate back to the excellent points they've made, although I think my perspective may be slightly accretive to what's already been discussed. As speakers have indicated, although regional economic integration in Northeast Asia has been slow out of the starting blocks, the necessity for regional economic cooperation is now recognized and enshrined in important sub-regional and regional pacts in Asia. The question now is whether and how we can leverage the progress enshrined in those pacts to complete the process of forming an economic union in Northeast Asia. With that framework, let me touch upon some of the key milestones, again, already mentioned by many of the speakers. Although regional economic cooperation in Asia is a relatively new phenomena, there has been significant progress. The ASEAN Free Trade Area, for example, in 1982, leading to the ASEAN Economic Community called the AEC in 2015, which seeks to, quote, create an integrated and connected regional economy within the global system. There are other trade pacts, APEC, which was expanded beyond the region to include the US and even Russia as part of the region, and Pacific Coast countries in South America, all tending to reinforce the momentum toward a regional economic cooperation. As Dr. Petrovsky mentioned, however, and Dr. Bo as well, there are many differences between the EEC and the AEC, notwithstanding their common name. And it's the lack of a common market or monetary union, not necessarily addressing other issues besides trade in a systematic and in-depth way, the lack of supranational institutions such as the European Economic Commission or the European Central Bank, and the charters that do not provide for sanctioning members, that do not follow through on agreements. And we've heard differing views from the speakers as to whether that's something that can be overcome, or as Dr. Bo proposes, something that will be overcome, and we will move closer to the EEC model. With respect to Northeast Asia, I argue that progress toward an economic union has stalled altogether, despite Korean administrations before the present one that lobbied strenuously for the trilateral free trade agreement among the Republic of Korea, China, and Japan, as one of our speakers mentioned. And there are many reasons for this. Again, as mentioned, including ongoing political rivalries and tensions. For example, Japan's economic retaliation against Korea over the decision by a South Korean court holding Japan liable to pay damages to former Korean comfort women. That certainly didn't help those who hoped that economic relations could be divorced from political controversies. As Dr. Petrovsky mentioned, recollection of the atrocities and the divisions of World War II also still rankle. Unresolved territorial disputes further stoke resentments. And as if I may ask the big question, can China convince her neighbors in Northeast Asia that her aims are not hegemonistic? While it is perhaps not surprising or even per se threatening for China as a great power to wish to balance US influence in the region, what is China's vision for a peaceful Asia community? Can China ever imagine itself, can China and Japan ever imagine themselves as playing the role in an integrated Asian community that Germany and France play in the EU as godfathers of the Union and anchors of stability and peace? Despite these challenges, regional cooperation, I think, took a great leap forward in 2019. Again, as mentioned by Dr. Petrovsky, in the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. The pact was initially conceived in a couple iterations previously as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but when the US under Donald Trump dropped out in 2017, China stepped in. The RCEP, once ratified by all the signatories, will be the largest free trade organization in the world, representing 29% of global gross domestic product. It significantly lowers tariffs, and new rules relating to the origin of manufactured products within the region will make supply chain management within the region significantly less onerous. And it is expected to generate 400 billion in new trade over a 10-year period. But whether that leads to deeper economic integration in Northeast Asia remains to be seen. If I may, I think Dr. Bo described an excellent goal for Northeast Asia. I think Dr. Petrovsky described various mechanisms that would promote integration, and Dr. Béglé provided a very good economic rationale for the nations, for the countries in Northeast Asia to cooperate economically, given their different strengths that they can contribute to the whole. But in my view, it may require more than that. The nations of Northeast Asia need to start looking past recent wrongs and begin to see themselves as sharing a common destiny. And it is in this area that there is a role for like-minded individuals and organizations in planting the seeds for which a true Asian economic community might grow. Just as the EU is built, as mentioned by Dr. Béglé, on a common culture, East Asia's profound historical ties, cultural, philosophical, religious, and aesthetic, can be the basis for closer regional collaboration. So rather than focusing on the upheaval and crisis of the last 2 centuries, the focus should be on the preceding centuries of peaceful interchange and the potential for the future. In a speech at the Sheraton Walker Hill in a speech at the Sheraton Walker Hill in Korea in 1995, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who together with his wife, Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, founded the predecessors of today's sponsoring organization, as well as founding my own company, the H.J. Magnolia Korea Foundation, proclaimed that, quote, an ideal world means coexisting politically, prospering together economically, and creating an ethical society of goodness. But how do we create such a dynamic? Again, in a speech in 1981 to the International Conference on Unity of Sciences in Seoul, Korea, while discussing the need to close the gap between the rich and the poor, Reverend Moon pointed out the way. Quote, to overcome these problems, we need to find a solution beyond humanism. To accomplish the unity and reconciliation of the classes, a center point of absolute value is needed. Such a center point of absolute value can be found in the sources of Asian tradition: filial piety, family, and faith. Thus, to succeed, an Asian Pacific Union must evolve beyond just government-to-government relations and embrace the institutions of religion and civil society. At an Asian Pacific Summit in 2019 in Phnom Penh, sponsored by Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, the Universal Peace Federation, the Royal Government of Cambodia, and other participants issued the Phnom Penh Declaration, a call to address the critical issues of our time by forming an Asia-Pacific Union supported by government and civil society. Among several visionary initiatives, it called for, quote, embodying the ideal of living for the sake of others to help reconcile the differences and overcome divisions and establish a culture of one global family. On the basis of the ideals expressed in the Phnom Penh Declaration, we should continue to advocate for a formal role for the world's great spiritual traditions and peace-building NGOs in advising their respective national representatives to ASEAN, RCEP, and other regional organizations in formulation of proposals for greater regional cooperation. That's a big ask and a big dream, but it's only the beginning. As Reverend Moon said in his 1981 speech to the International Conference on the Unity of Sciences, with Asia as its starting point, a realistic united economic sphere could be established, connecting East and West, North and South in a new civilization. This would result in peace and a new world centering on God's love which is the absolute value. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Willis, for insightful views on how we can build a one world family. After listening to all four panelists with their insightful presentations, see how we can consolidate their proposals into, the unified one that we can really move forward. Let us invite up all panelists again for the questions section. So let me go with the questions. Okay, one question for Professor Bo. The question, it says, your vision of decades ahead is encouraging indeed, but how or what to do to proceed with such a path from the current state of affairs, which are full of distrust and even hostility among the countries concerned? Any suggestion for a starting point?
Okay, very, very good question, very challenging question. I think I have 2 years, I can hear the voice of the realist, and I can also hear the voice of the idealist. So I'm also having 2 languages. I'm speaking the language of idealism, but in the meantime, I also understand the language realism. If we talk about how do we go from here to our dream goals, I think we have to start looking at the so-called reality. I think several panelists have already discussed this kind of so-called reality now. But let's look at, because I did not mention anything about US before, I'd like to bring US in to talk about US role in this formation of potentially forming these EU. If you look at the Joe Biden's policy, President Biden has a policy toward China. It's called a 3C policy. First C is competition, second C is confrontation, third C is cooperation. So Biden administration is prepared to compete with China over technology and the economic growth. And Biden administration is also prepared to confront China in terms of human rights and also kind of security issues. But in the meantime, I think Biden administration has been emphasizing the point of they are willing to cooperate with China. So I see a light there. I don't see confrontation, competition all the time. I do see a possibility of somehow, U.S. and China would be able to work it together. And from Chinese point of view, I think, we all know Chinese President Xi Jinping, but, I think we have different interpretations. He used the term 人类命运共同体 in Chinese, called basically shared destiny of humankind, mankind. So he has a bigger vision for the whole entire world. So, but, and that could be interpreted as kind of China is showing its true color, trying to be hegemony in the world. China has its own version of the world. But anyway, I think China also prepared to work with other countries for a better future. When maybe because of that different value systems, they may not agree on everything. One potential area is climate change. I think Biden administration and Chinese government are also make separate commitment for the goal. China has the 2060 kind of a carbon neutral goal, and I think China is is working very hard toward that goal. And Biden administration is coming back to Paris Agreement. This is very, very, very important. So I think there must be a lot of areas where 2 major countries can work with each other. So in terms of realities, there will be a lot of problems, difficulties. There may be potential to go to war. Because I'm also a realist. I follow Chinese politics on a daily basis. I follow whatever is going on in the world. But I'm also confident that, if we have to have a goal for the future, then we have to work toward that goal, regardless. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bo. Yes, it's important that cooperation and the common goal can realize the project. So next question can go to any one of our speakers. So what reasons are there to trust China that it does not misuse its power and influence to impose its autocratic system to all the participants? Yeah, please keep the answer in 1 to 2 minutes if possible, that we can listen to more views. So who can address to this question? What reasons are there to trust China that it does not misuse its power and influence to impose its autocratic system to all the participants?
If I may just very briefly, I spent, gosh, 20 to 25 years on the ground living in China. I love China. I love the people of China. I think they're among the most rationalist and rational and easy to work with people in the world. Not all Westerners find that to be the case, but once you understand them, it is. And I think they have an enormous, many things to contribute to the world. But the issue is still out, the same as 15 years ago, I think, when the president of the World Bank said, is China going to be a hegemon or a stakeholder in the international system? And the Chinese didn't even have a word, a translation for the word stakeholder. So they actually took a while to figure out what that was all about. And we see positive and negative. And my experience is the Chinese, it's not the same framework as us, which means a little bit, Dr. Bo, I worry about the EU, of course, is Western in the sense, so you have supranational institutions and you have legal norms and enforcement mechanisms. My sense is that's not really fits as well into East Asian culture as it does in Europe. However, having said that, I've never not solved a problem through long discussion and listening and negotiation with Chinese counterparties. I don't know how that translates into a program, but I think we need to learn to communicate differently than we do in the West and not rest on our own suppositions that the way we do things are the right way. I actually find, again, through long experience, that the Chinese get a lot right. So I think we need to work with them and we need to talk to them, and we need, you never give up your principles, but I think there's hope.
Yes, I think thank you so much, Mr. Willis. I think it's also workable if we accept cultural differences. Okay, next question. I think this goes to Dr. Petrovsky.
Yes, actually, yeah.
I'm sorry. You want to address the question just now, or?
Yes, but maybe just a few words about the question,
okay,
which was posed already. Well, I think that if we really want to build economic union in the region of Northeast Asia, we have no choice but to trust China, because it should be, I mean, the future union should be inclusive. And for example, let's take the story with the RCEP, which we discussed. It was initiated by ASEAN countries and by China. And now it exists, it's already in place. And this means that China shows that China is ready to play by the common rules, to be inside the system, which was discussed and agreed by many other countries. And this is a very positive sign. So, so my conclusion is very clear that we need to trust China in terms of economic union. I mean, we can discuss differences, ideology, whatever, but we should concentrate on economic incentives, first of all.
Yeah, that is also very wise for a win-win situation. So again, Dr. Petrovsky, here's a question for you. And at today's webinar, we heard a lot about potential economic cooperation. However, USA and EU still stress sanctions. Moreover, China is more, I mean, it's often portrayed as the main threat rather than a potential partner. Recently, President Biden again portrays Russia and China almost like enemies. Then, in your opinion, what can be the realistic basis for the partnerships in Northeast Asia? Same question again, similar.
The question to me? I think that we should get rid of all these sanctions, which, I mean, it's a very bad way of doing things at all. I mean, if we take the history of economic sanctions, they never worked in any case. And I think that what is needed between, I hope that the United States and China could have the model of relations which could combine competition and cooperation, really, which means that they should be able to discuss their differences and have the ways and mechanisms to solve the problems which can arise. But again, we know that, for example, there are many sanctions imposed against Russia, and there are many restrictions imposed by the United States on China. I mean, economic sanctions, technology exchange, etc., etc., etc. This is not the way of doing things, and this is not the way towards the future economic union in the region of Northeast Asia. So we need somehow to not to use sanctions, I mean, between countries of the region. Whether it be American sanctions or some kind of restriction which, for example, were imposed by Japan or South Korea against each other. So my proposal is just not use this instrument, never, ever. Thank you.
Yes, if that, thank you so much, Dr. Petrovsky. If that will be the case, it will be excellent. So another question comes to several speakers use the model of EU, but the EU has significant problems, not just over Brexit, but over the continuing economic struggles of a single currency, the challenges of refugees, radicalized youth, and cultural differences. Some say the core problem is that the EU adopted an entirely secular and humanist approach, disregarding its non-common spiritual tradition. How can Asia avoid this mistake? I think that this is really a role from our Northeast Asian countries. Who want to address this question? Professor Bo, please.
Yes, I think this is a question is a little bit premature for Northeast Asia, because we don't have a union yet, so we will not have these mature union problems now. I think this question is a very good question, because it's a good question for you. How EU will evolve from now to the future. But I think for Northeast Asia at the moment, we think, in my view, we need to replicate some part of the EU model, so to move forward. I think that will be a future problem to deal with in the future.
I see. I think it's also, a good advice to prepare for the future. All right. Next question. Let me see, because there were so many questions. So, to Dr. Béglé, in what way do you think the European nations that are part of the Security Council could contribute to the establishment of an East Asia Economic Union as a way to support the security and stability in the world? Dr. Béglé, please.
Thank you very much. I don't think it has to come top down from the Security Council, which anyway, as you know, in many cases, people are blocking each other and it's a veto. So the Security Council works for trying to solve very extreme crises, and sometimes has pain in doing it. I believe the North Asian community has to build bottom up. Europe has also be a local initiative. So it has to come from the countries themselves. And if we take the three phases which had been proposed, I very much believe most of them have a common interest in the free trade. I would see something like ASEAN model. And by the way, you see that ASEAN, you have ASEAN +1, ASEAN +2. So I could imagine some of those alliances not to be exclusive, but countries could be part of more than one alliance. So I believe in a model where there would be a free trade. Then if I follow the ASEAN model, free trade facilitation, and that implies, for example, common IT portals so that you can really move around with the goods. Based on the differentiating factor that some countries like Japan with the 5 Sigma, they would have an edge on any other country, especially China, in terms of the last 1 or 2% of the perfection in quality, down to countries like Vietnam, where the cost of the manpower is lower. So a free trade agreement linked to some mutual investment protection would be the first phase. And this is very likely to happen because it is in the interest of all of them. I'm more prudent on the currency thing because when you have a common currency, you also have to have the same budget policy. Ironically, I think I see more professionalism in the budgeting in East Asia than among some Southern European countries, but that's another story. Still, you need to have common budget approach. If not, the one would simply finance the other one with a free pocket. I do not believe in the free movement of people because free movement of people really implies that people trust each other and have an aligned vision. In Europe, we made a tunnel under the channel and the UK went into Brexit. So it's not the infrastructure, it's not just the economical, it's very, very important to have a community of minds, to have, well, what you call the common family. If really people start respecting each other and sharing values, then you can have total freedom of movement. But I think for that, it's later. So in short, free trade and free trade facilitation, very fast, probably yes. Currency implies budgeting, probably no, and definitely the free movement of people will be the one taking longest. And we have to understand each other. You know, there was that question about trusting China. It's not just a question of that the one is a communist and the other one is the more Western type of society. It's also, let's not forget, the fact that China has massively, it means for many, many millions of people, changed their life in very few years, maybe 30 years. And such a radical change, I'm sorry to say, because I believe very much in the democratic model, but such a radical change needs a little bit of leadership. If not, there is a risk that things go uncontrolled. So you see, the speed of the change to the size of the change also implies a model which is a bit more controlling the process than total freedom. If I take my country, Switzerland, which is probably a perfect model of democracy, we negotiated, I remember in Parliament 3 years ago, if the cows had to have horns or not. Now, if you can afford to discuss those details in the federal parliament, it's that you do not have more important matter to discuss. But when you have real big changes to manage, you have to be a little bit more in the driving seat. So we need all of us to understand the reason why the other countries in the future zone act. I would say something similar about Russia as well. So we should not impose one model. We should accept different mentalities. We should accept different cultures. We should accept different realities, development levels, and we have to learn to share values and act as one family.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Béglé. Common values and understanding of one another is also very important in the movement of this project. So I think it comes to the last question to Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis, according to your experiences, how would the Northeast Asian economic integration process contribute to Korea's unification drive? Mr. Willis, please.
Well, again, if North Korea sees all of her neighbors, including those as Russia and China in the history of the Cold War and even of late, who were their staunch supporters and both economically and politically and even militarily, are united and prospering and working together and benefiting mutually, one just would hope that they would feel comfortable asking to be part of that. We have to analyze how fast they can go and in what phases their economy can open, and understand the political ramifications to the current regime for those and take those things into account. But I think it's the example that the other countries set, especially again, given the historical animosities that existed, different factions within those countries or between those countries for so many years, that would be perhaps an inducement for them to come along.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Willis. Wow, it's really a very exciting dialogues, and I think we can really conclude it into proposals that we can really further develop this project. So may I invite each one of you to give like 1 minute wrap up for your conclusion, if you have. Who will go? Who wants to go first for just a wrap up of your conclusion? How about Professor Bo?
Okay, sure. Okay, my conclusion is that number one, we should have a goal. Number two, we should realize there should be difficulties along the way. Number three, we should find a way to overcome these difficulties. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Petrovsky, please.
Yes, actually, my conclusion would be very short. I think what we need, if we are really serious about the future of Northeast Asian Economic Union, we have to concentrate on two key issues: the economic connectivity, which could include infrastructure projects, which we discussed, and the second key issue is trade facilitation in a broad sense. And if our countries could concentrate on this, that would be a good step forward.
Thank you. It's very useful for our backup team to do our homework. So next, may I invite Dr. Béglé and then Mr. Willis, please. Dr. Béglé, please.
I also agree we need to have a goal, like a compass, to know what is our north. Mm-hmm. Economy has to be used as a mean. It will be easy to sell because it's in the common interest of everybody. We should focus on an exchange based on the complementarities between the various countries. For example, all the minerals coming from Siberia, all the know-how on the IT sector, for example, coming from South Korea, the sense of perfection of Japan, the huge market of China, etc., etc. So we should work on those complementarities and trade facilitation. But to go further, the key factor is to really work on mutual respect and community of mind values. And by building a community of values, then it will take time, but then there is a very strong possibility for Northeast Asia to really achieve the goal we set at the beginning. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Béglé. And Mr. Willis, please.
Yeah, I think it's hard to get the man on the street excited about regional economic organizations. But in a way, that's part of the task. We've made really good progress. ASEAN, AEC, RCEP, all of those institutions, I think, as Dr. Béglé just pointed out, focus on something of real interest to the governments, which is economic development, growth, and prosperity. To go beyond that, we need political will, which means, for example, the people of Korea have to be reconciled with the problems they have with Japan, et cetera, in the region. And that requires the involvement of more than just government, because government responds to political, responds to the people, not always leads the people. And so I think civil society has to have a role in all of this. How they work their way in, it's not clear. But I think there's a lot of leadership, people with goodwill, with great ideas, and we need to begin to promote those. And then take concrete steps, such as Dr. Petrovsky mentioned, the underseas tunnel. Something that is beginning to catch the imagination of people here in Korea, for example. So more of that, and build on the common cultural traits, as Dr. Béglé pointed out, and then perhaps we can achieve some of Dr. Bo's goals more quickly than even he projects.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Willis, and all of our panelists. I believe with all your cooperation, this project will surely be realized. So let me introduce you the next section. I mean, before we conclude this section, I just want to announce that the next section will be the potential benefits. The potential and benefits of trade and business activities with North Korea. So please, you're invited to register online, and then it will be started at 2 p.m. CET time. And actually, we have prepared a very nice video of what Mr. Willis also mentioned, that back to 1981, the founder of Universal Peace Federation, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, actually made also a proposal to construct the Great Asian Highway Zone that runs through China, Korea, and Japan, and eventually link the world by constructing a Great Free World Highway Zone to connect the whole world. So let us watch the video to learn from the insight of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. But before showing the video, let me invite up all the panelists to screen and wave to our participants. Who support this webinar. I think they are so excited to listen to all the insightful views, and there are many questions that we will address later on. Thank you so much, and stay in touch. Let's watch the video.
My proposal. As a conclusion, I would like to make a proposal. It is to construct a Great Asian Highway Zone, which would run through the China, Korea, and Japan, and then eventually link the world by constructing a great free world highway zone to connect the whole world. This highway would be the great international highway around which freedom is guaranteed. And it would go through mainland China, crossing the Korean Peninsula from north to south to an underwater tunnel to bridge to Japan and moving north through the entire Japanese island. If this highway were constructed, the three Asian countries would be linked through the highway, and they would become one. The economic and cultural exchange between them would be so frequent that it would literally enable them to form an Asian common community. China would probably agree to this, and so would Japan. Korea would undoubtedly welcome it. The United States and Germany would also participate. If this plan is carried out according to the framework suggested here, free traffic would become possible among all the people of the Asian countries. As a result, North Korea would have to give up its ambition of aggression through military means. It would be forced to choose peaceful means for unification instead. Thus, by uniting the Asians, it would eventually become possible to connect the upper and the lower classes of the world with the yellow peoples serving as a mediator. In order to concretely realize such an ideal, the Korean residents now living in Japan, the United States and China would be connected to form the technological group. Then automatically, the direction of Japan and the United States would also come into accord. Then based on the new economic foundation, a highway which guarantees freedom could be developed worldwide. Thus, through completing the unrestricted Asian highway and realizing the historically long cherished ideal of joining the upper and the lower classes, a great migration of the yellow peoples will come about, with Asia as its starting point. By establishing a realistic, unified economic sphere and connecting the East and the West in the new civilization, the peace of the new world can be realized. Centering on the God's love, which is the absolute value. In this age of the transition of the civilization, when Western civilization joins that of the East and prepares to meet the new Pacific civilization, I sincerely hope that all you distinguished participants from all over the 100 countries of the world who are participating in this memorable international conference on the unity of the science here in Korea will have deep insight into these matters and will offer concrete cooperation regarding them. Thank you very much.